Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by 21 Media Productions and Sports Social. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton, and this is episode 10 as we continue our NBA basketball journey, a short Hezi tween and step away here in the UK. Drew, how have you been, man? Good Christmas?
I'm married, Josh. This is the best time of year, man. Christmas time. You get to I actually, if you can believe it, I shut down for like 2 or 3 days. So today is Monday on this recording, and I put on the calendar that let me restart my life again because, during this Christmas period, specifically after Christmas, you go through that awkward period where you don't know what day it is, you don't know what time it is, and you don't even eat properly. I haven't eaten breakfast or dinner in the last 3 or 4 days. So I got back in the gym this morning to try to get in some sort of routine. But Christmas Day was great. The kids loved, the moment, loved the day. And like I said, we've had a family tradition for 3 years now to where we go out to eat. Because what I realized a couple years ago, when you have young kids and, you're cooking from home, there's one person responsible for the food and you're not in the moment because you're back and forth in the kitchen. Then you have to clean up. And then more importantly, when it comes time to eat, you're not even hungry because you've been smelling it all day. So it was great to be present, be around the kids. And we went to some friends in the evening so we can have some adult time. So a couple of rums. So it was great, man. How about you? I see you've been on the move a little bit.
Yeah, it's been nice. I've been sort of back and two between my families and my girlfriends. Obviously, I'm based in Liverpool, which is kind of away from them both. So I've been doing the rounds a lot, but it's been good. As you say, most wonderful time of the year, and the basketball on Christmas Day had me hooked as well. I'm not gonna lie, I was glued to the television for hours. That Cavs Knicks game straight out the gate, an absolute barnstormer. So there was so much to enjoy about the NBA over Christmas, but. Obviously, Drew, we're coming towards the end of 2025. I promised our good listeners that we were going to rank every team based on their 2025. And we will make some bold predictions for the new year, but we're going to do that on the next episode just so we can focus strictly on the past year. This will be the last time we look back before we start to look ahead to the new year. So the way this is going to work, Drew, we've got 5 tiers here. S tier is obviously the best, and I think we know who may end up in that. A, B, C, D, and F. So we will go through each team in alphabetical order as they are on the badges on the screen. You should be all able to see this. If you're listening to this podcast, by the way, it may be a bit more of a visual one, so you can come and catch us over on YouTube as well to see where these teams land and see the overall ranking at the end of this. But we'll start with Atlanta Hawks, Drew, and I guess kind of like a very Hawksy at this stage couple of years, really, where they just kind of teetering around 500, a little bit below last season as the 8th seed, a little bit below at the moment as the 10th seed. A lot of transactions that happened in the summer, especially around draft night, trading away Derek Queen and taking in Asa Newell with the New Orleans Pelicans, acquiring Kristaps Porzingis, Luke Kennard, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Off the back of that as well. This feels like a team to me that probably is looking at like top of D tier maybe, but only based on the fact that all this Trae Young stuff just feels like it's dragging out now. The vibes don't feel very good around this team. Like they would be a C tier team for me for sure if the vibes were just a little bit better and it felt like there was that sort of direction of travel that was taking them into a more positive destination. I just feel like one chip has to move or fall now before that positive direction can be completely pinpointed.
Yeah, well said. I think when it comes to injuries in the NBA, they can be a gift and a curse. A curse because if you lose your top talent, then you fall down the standings. But specifically with Trae Young having that MCL injury, it got an opportunity for them to evaluate the rest of the roster. And I think what they found out is that Johnson kid may be the face of the franchise there, right?
Yeah.
Since Trae Young has returned, Atlanta's 0-6 now, and defensively is where they're really struggling. They're giving up 125 points a game. So now, and we've talked about this on previous episodes about the small point guard. What's the future for that position specifically? And with Trae Young, obviously what he gives you offensively, he's giving it up on the other end. And it's ironic that we start with Atlanta because on Twitter yesterday, I started to see some noise around this team, specifically around their number 1 draft pick from a year ago, Zachary Richey, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It was announced by NBA Central that the Hawks are open to moving him, that he hasn't developed as they thought they should. And I saw the last 15 years the number one overall pick. And you got to think, if you're an Atlanta fan, how unlucky are you? You know, they're comparing this pick to the one that Cleveland got years ago. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but if you're an NBA fan, you know that number one pick that was a bust.
Anthony Bennett.
Anthony Bennett,
how can
yes.
you forget?
Oh man, yes. But if you look at like the last 8 years, if you look at, obviously Wemby, and you look at, the other ones, the other top picks, Atlanta had just really, really got unlucky with their timing. But yeah, I'm right there with you. They're D, and it just, you look at last year, 40-42, they finished 8. You know, they're 2 games under 500. This year, they're 3 games under 500, and they're just right there in that play-in game. It seems like they're in the play-in position every single season. So I'm right with you. Let's stick them in D.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the Boston Celtics then. And we're going to get some disagreements on this. And also, do you know what, Drew? I'm happy to be open-minded here. I'm happy for us to look at the tier. And if another team comes in and we're like, they need to be in that tier, but maybe the other team shouldn't be in the same tier as them, we can move this around as well. I'm torn on Boston. I could go A or B. I'm tempted to go B based on the fact that it felt like last season was a little bit below expectations to some extent. Obviously, Tatum gets hurt in the playoffs, which doesn't help things, absolutely. But then this season they've just been so great, and that's why I'm tempted to maybe have them as like a low A, high B.
Well, we got to give our listeners some perspective first. We're saying that B is tier 3, or is it tier 2?
I'm gonna say, like, we can just do this one out the gate if you want. I'm gonna say that OKC Thunder are in a league of their own in S tier. So I'm saying that B is tier 2 behind that.
Okay, so the S tier, we're only placing one team there.
I think we should.
5.
I think we should.
Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, just some context for our listeners.
We'll go for it straight away.
Yeah, let's just do. That's an easy. There's no explanation there. So they're the best team in the league, despite their struggles with the San Antonio Spurs. So just for our listeners out there, we got OKC at the top, and then we have tier A, B, C, D, E there. So tier B, yeah, I'm right with you. Like, although you look at their record, they're third in the East, 19-12. They have really exceeded expectations. There's a lot of talk about Tatum. He may be returning, but I can't stick this team in A right now. I think they're a great regular season team, but I don't see it translating to anything more once we get to the nitty-gritty of the playoffs. I'm B.
Yeah, I'm happy for us to agree on B. The Brooklyn Nets then, one of the much more rough 2025s, really. Again, this is what is hard because you can't look to the future, and I imagine that the future in Brooklyn is what everybody is now looking towards. But it felt like last season they were still sort of, in the aftermath of the big trade they made a couple of years ago, and it'd be very hard for me to say that this team is anything other than, as basically as low as it gets.
Yeah, but I could play devil's advocate here, and I could say, well, if you've been living under a rock, I will help you out. Brooklyn has won the last 7 out of 10 games in December. And in this month, they have the number 1 defense in the league and number 2 net rating. And a lot of that is with Jordi Fernandez, who we spoke on a couple of episodes ago, with me specifically, about how great a coach he is and how everyone around the league is recognizing it. And he is really maximizing this roster. Michael Porter Jr. is playing like a, Eastern Conference Player of the Month. He's averaging 27.7 rebounds, 50% from the field, 44 from the 3. And then Cam Thomas, who was out 20 games with a hamstring, he's just returned, and he had 30 points in 20 minutes. So these two players, they have the fireworks to be able to win you games. And then, you talk about their defense, all their role pieces, and they got a lot of young, hungry guys. So I would be tempted to move them up a tier, but the only reason why I'm with you and I will keep them at the bottom is because I believe this is a team that want to tank, right? They don't want to win. So eventually, sometime throughout the season, you got to think that they're going to make a trade, whether that's for Michael Porter Jr. or whether that's Cam Thomas. So I think they will, the GMs there, the people who are upstairs in that front office will want to slow down this juggernaut that's beginning to get a little gas in the tank. So, yeah, for now, the bigger picture, yes, they are going to be bottom. But right now, they're looking good, Josh.
Yeah, I've seen a funny tweet that keeps going around at the moment saying the Nets are gonna have to fire Jordi Fernandez. Like, no trades,
Yeah.
no trades to tank. They're just gonna have to straight up fire the coach because he's too good. He's too
Yeah,
good for this
sure.
franchise. We'll move on to the Charlotte Hornets then. Another one that I fear could be very, very low in this list. To be honest, just nothing that really jumps off the page with Charlotte. Again, if we were to talk about the future, great. We can talk about there being a brighter future there. Con Kneppel and guys like that we spoke about a lot on the podcast this season. But I think it just has to be F tier for Charlotte again.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Although they've won 2 games in a row, again, this is another team who want to go into the lottery. They want to look towards the future, and they know they have the future with Knuppel. I wouldn't be surprised to see moves with their teams as well to jeopardize any momentum that they might be trying to build from a personnel standpoint. But this is a team that we got to put at the bottom.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the Chicago Bulls, and a team that I was quite high on coming into the season, Drew. It felt like they hit that perfect little storm at the start of the season of, just a team. I think I said at the time, I was like, this could be a complete accident where the franchise had no direction, none of these kind of things that were meant for this to be in any way purposeful or meaningful. And it turned out it wasn't, and the Bulls have reverted to type. And again, similar to the Hawks, they are a team that just relentlessly flirts around that sort of, just under 500 mark. They're just under 500 at the moment. Finished 9th seed last season, 9th seed again at the moment. I just think this is a D team written all over it.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that one. I wasn't as high as them as you were at the beginning of the season. I knew they would fall back down to earth. And, they're you said it perfectly. They're an Atlanta Hawks that will always just be flirting around the playing game.
Yep, Cleveland Cavaliers then, a year of 2 halves, really. You'd say like they've been one of the biggest disappointments, I think, coming into this NBA season. They've just really not managed to get it going at all, and the injury to Darius Garland looks like it's maybe more serious than any of us first thought. But he's had a couple of games recently, a bit of a resurgence where he's put more points up and things like that. But it's still not been enough to get Cleveland over the edge. Lost 2 games in a row, sit in the 8th seed, just above 500. I think they're a seed, Drew, but that's a lot of that is propped up by how well they did last season, because this season they've been really poor.
Yeah, they're a tough one for me because you look at last year, number 1 seed that flamed out in the playoffs. And right now, I just think it's a case of them not making shots. They're still leading the league in 3-point attempts, but they're middle or the bottom pack in actually converting those threes. And I like to think that they might get hot. Right now they're 4-6 in their last 10 games, as you mentioned, 8th in the East. Darius Garland is playing much better. It's really hard for me to see them being an 8th seed all season. They have all the pieces. They're located in the East. So, I mean, I actually think when it's all said and done, they'll be in that. Where did you put them at? C?
I was thinking C, yeah.
I mean, I could see them moving up to B, but we could put them in C now. And I think as we go along, we'll have to move them up. Because I would like to think that sooner or later everyone else will pick their game, because Donovan Mitchell's having a career year.
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell's been unbelievable. It actually reminds me a lot of those old Utah Jazz teams that Donovan Mitchell was on, to be honest, where it felt like everything else was disappointing around him and he was still capable of 50-point nights and all these kinds of things. Onto the team who I think honestly may just be the hardest to rank in this whole thing, which is the Dallas Mavericks. I would love to have them just rooted to the bottom of this for that Luka Doncic trade, but it wouldn't feel very fair to Dallas Mavericks fans. Just such a strange year, Drew. Maybe the strangest year that any franchise has ever had. And for that, I'm maybe looking at D tier, just on the basis that they're not like the worst team we've ever seen. The trade is the worst trade I've ever seen, but I just don't know. I think maybe it's D.
Yeah, and just for context for our listeners, Josh and I have not discussed this at all before. We're live on the air, and every time we go to a team, I'm already planting in my mind where I want them, and I automatically put them on D. You can't put them on F because they have the talent. You just got to think that, once they get healthy, build chemistry, and they're a team that I believe could get to C, but I think ultimately Anthony Davis will get traded. And they are a team that will probably make the play-in, but they're a D team to me. But you got to like the future that they have going. And right now, as good as Luka Doncic is, I mean, you could argue that you would rather build your team around Cooper Flag. So the future is bright in Dallas.
Yeah, you'd like to think it is. It is bright. I mean, I don't know what the Anthony Davis trade value is. You can't trade injured players, and that guy just cannot stay off the medical table. So
Somebody will take him.
I'm going to put them in low D on the
D.
basis of that Luka trade was just so bad. So we'll go below the Bulls and the Hawks there, which maybe feels a bit unfair, but that Luka trade was so bad. Move on then to the Denver Nuggets. Again, I guess like maybe kind of a tough one. I think I'd probably have them in A. I think they'll probably be our first A team of this one. What are you thinking, Drew?
I mean, I'm surprised that you're even questioning this. I mean, the Denver Nuggets, you got to look at this, right? Let's give perspective. They're 22-9, and think about the injuries that they dealt with. Aaron Gordon was having a career year. He was shooting 50, 40, 90, and he's been out with a torn hamstring. And then Christian Bond has been out. They've been out with 3 starters this year, and they're still, the number 3 seed in the West. They're, 4 games away from OKC. They're an easy A. I'm surprised that we got to even think about this.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in my head I was like they could be flirting with the S tier, Drew, but I think you're right. I think they're an absolutely certain A
Well,
team.
I mean, again, how many teams can we put in S tier?
I would say we only put one. I would say we do OKC.
Okay,
as
yeah,
the one.
okay,
There's only one. There's only one championship that people can win. Even if we're not hanging up NBA Cup banners these days, there's only one championship the teams can win. So
yeah,
we'll
OKC are they're in a bracket by themselves, and Denver are right below that. Agreed.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Detroit, again, another hard one because of just a year of 2 halves, really. But you referenced on one of the recent episodes that quote from Cade last season. It was like, this is not a team that is, a record losing streak. This is a team that they all thought internally could go on to so much more, and then you've seen that this season. They lost to the Clippers in quite strange circumstances last night, but they're still the 1 seed in the East, 24-8 at the moment. I think I'd probably go B, just above the Celtics with this one. Drew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm on B. I look at them sitting pretty on top of the standings, and I like how they have built from within. And I like the fact, as I mentioned a couple of episodes ago, that a lot of those guys were there when they were on that terrible losing streak. So they have perspective, and they will continue to stay hungry because they don't want to go back to those times where they were the laughingstock of the NBA. But it's just something about them that I'm not believing it yet when it comes to the playoffs specifically. I think they need another year, but they're definitely in the tier with the Boston Celtics for sure.
Absolutely.
But they're not quite at the Denver Nuggets level.
No, I've put them above the Celtics just to recognise how great they've been for so much of this season, and feel like that could even be harsh on Boston, really, but there's probably a toying cost between the two of them. Move on to the Golden State Warriors then, who have weirdly become not one of the teams who flirts around 500, but one of the teams who just constantly flirts around the play-in. I'm tempted to say that they're just a C team lock, to be honest, Drew. Like, they could be better, they could be worse, but I can't have them in that same tier with like the Hawks and the Bulls and teams like that.
Yeah, they're a really strange team
to
really evaluate. I mean, I actually could see them leading the D tier just because they're so small, and I think they're 1 injury away from their season really collapsing. Obviously, you got the ace in the back pocket, which is Steph Curry, so you could argue that. I mean, if you're putting him in C, are you putting him before or behind Cleveland?
Oh, behind Cleveland, yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you there, but I mean, I could argue the best team in the D tier. I'm not even sure if they're quite C, but they do have Steph Curry. They do have championship pedigree, so for that case alone, we got to put some respect behind their name.
Yeah, and they got to the second round of the playoffs, which, like, from the play-in again to be able to do that, I think that probably deserves some kind of credit, which just keeps them above those 3 teams in the D tier. Sorry, but I'll put them below Cleveland into C. Then we'll move on to the Houston Rockets, who I think probably joined Denver in A, and I don't know if there's much of a conversation about that. The Kevin Durant trade looks better really with every passing game because of the scoring impetus, offensive impetus that he's able to bring. He could do with help on the offensive side of the ball. I think that goes without saying really at the moment. But a couple of big injuries they've been suffering from this season with Dorian Finney-Smith and Fred VanVleet out for the season. So I'm thinking Houston joins Denver in A. Drew, what are you thinking?
in A behind Denver.
Yeah.
And I mentioned on the last episode that Tari Eason was out, but he's back now.
He is
So
back.
when he went out, he was a top 5 in 3-point percentage. So you keep your eyes on the Houston Rockets in this next month.
He was actually the one who sagged off Dennis Schroeder in the corner for the Sacramento Kings game winner in overtime.
It's rust, man. It's rust. He's been out a while.
Yeah, we'll let him off for that one if he can keep sinking more 3-pointers. There's a couple of teams in here who have really had double-sided years. The Indiana Pacers. I could honestly, like, if the badge was there twice, I'd be putting last season's one in A, teetering with S, and then this season's one in F or D. I think F would maybe be harsh on the basis that, like, the star player was injured. They clearly just, they did a worse version of what the Celtics were trying to do, which is, like, we're just going to retool this year. This will be a down year for us. We'll tank, and then we'll go again once Tyrese Haliburton comes back from his injury. I'm tempted to go with high D, just on the basis that there is, like, future for this franchise. And I know I'm kind of being a hypocrite with our own rules there, Drew, but I think for last season, maybe even low C. Actually, I'm talking myself up more and more as I go on here.
Wow,
just based
I don't know
on
if
how,
we can go that far.
Based on how good last season was, losing in 7 to OKC, and honestly, if Haliburton didn't get injured in that game, there's every chance that we're talking about the champions here, and suddenly we have to put them in a much higher tier. But obviously, we're having such a disappointing season. What you thinking? I might need some help on this one.
I think D is fair because F, we know the situation with Haliburton. He's in that lineup. It completely changes everything. But I'm not too sure if I would put them too high because I still feel like the Pacers, they struck while the iron was hot last year. If you go back and you watch that playoff run, and it is about the lucky bounce sometimes. Think about how many lucky bounces they had during that playoff run. So, I'm not sure that if Haliburton was still healthy, that this would be a team that would be a top 3 team in the East this year. I'm not so sure of that. So, with that case, I would say D. It would be hard to put them in C for me personally.
Ooh, this is a tough one. I would love to have them in the bottom of C. I'll go with your bet for now, and then we can always revisit that towards the end. There's another team who I think are just joining them in D, and probably quite close to the bottom of D, to be honest, which is my LA Clippers. Again, like similar to the Pacers, really. Great season last season. The run that the Clippers went on after January in particular, after a pretty slow start to the season, was incredible. One of the best defensive teams in the league. Lost to Denver by basically an Aaron Gordon alley-oop dunk. So it felt like they were on the cusp of being able to, make a really deep playoff run. They'd probably lost to OKC in the second round, but the second round to me is a deep enough playoff run for a team like the Clippers. But then this season has just been incredibly disappointing. They probably flirt with F, to be honest, based on how bad this season has been. But I'm thinking low D, possibly below the Dallas Mavericks. What are you thinking, Drew?
Wow, that's bold. They have so many question marks. They're on a current 4-game winning streak.
Yeah.
The
weirdest 4-game winning streak in NBA history.
You just don't know what you're gonna get from day to day. I mean, last night, Kawhi scores 55 points. You just don't know. I wrote him off. I said it was over with, and it's so many question marks with this team. I'm in the D tier. I don't know if I have them below the Dallas Mavericks, though. I mean, that's harsh, don't you think?
Maybe it's just because of where you put Indiana that's convincing me on this, Joe. I think I'd be bumping Indiana up, and I'd be putting the Clippers somewhere in that sort of bracket, though. But I'll let you decide this one with the Clippers.
Well,
I think my emotions are too tied to this.
Well, how many teams do we get in each tier?
It does. That I'm not saying there's any rule on that. We can have as many. Besides S, we'll have just OKC and S, but.
Okay. Let's put them in D for now.
Okay.
And because we have some flexibility here, guys. We're not locked in. You see, Josh has the ability to drag and rejag, so we can reshuffle as we get here to the bottom half of the league. But right now, I would put them a step above Dallas.
I'm dying to drag Indiana up to that C tier. Don't worry, listeners. I'll convince Drew as we continue to go on.
Talk me to it. Talk me to it.
I'm not sure I can have them in the same tier as a couple of those teams they're in with. But we'll move on to the Los Angeles Lakers before we do any more dragging around.
This is interesting.
This is really interesting. Third seed last season, lost in the first round to Minnesota. Fourth seed this season. The Luka trade, you kind of have to factor in the same way you factored it into the Dallas one, even though it was just, given to them on a plate. I'm thinking B below the Boston Celtics. Could be tempted by C.
You know what? The first thought that came to my head when you mentioned the Lakers, I thought the top team in C.
I like that.
That's just my gut, just because they were 50-32 last year. Do you think they matched that record this year?
I think they probably do. Or like at least, within 2 games of that, I would say. It's just the defense of this team. It's the defense of this team that is why I think they've dropped a couple of big games recently in particular. They're a team that similar to last season, they'll get flamed out in the first round of the playoffs if they've not made a more sort of defensive minded trade by then. But basically, Marcus Smart is the only plus defender in that starting lineup, and he doesn't even start, I think, when everyone's healthy either.
Yeah, I just think I just do not believe that their style of play is fit for the quickly fast changing NBA right now, and they will just get ran off the court. Their talent will get them by on certain nights, but like you mentioned, I don't see them sniffing the second round this year. I'll see them in the same exact position as last year, and I mentioned putting them above Cleveland just because I think that their superstars are better than Cleveland superstars, but I see those teams as exactly the same.
Yeah, I think the Luka trade probably just lifts them above any of those other teams, which again, feels unfair on the other teams based on the fact the Luka trade was completely left on a plate for them. Can I tempt you to put Indiana back into C here, Drew? Just gonna check after every round, just in case.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Because this next one is interesting as well.
This next one is very interesting. Memphis Grizzlies, another play-in flirter of a team. The Ja Morant stuff is making me tempted to say they are in D, somewhere around that Atlanta Hawks, Chicago Bulls thing, probably below the Pacers, but I could bump the Pacers up, as we all know, full well by this stage. So this would be the team I'd maybe have lead in D if I was to bump the Pacers up, Drew. I'm not sure about you.
I think you've convinced me because they are D. I do not see them in the C tier whatsoever, but I think they're ahead of teams like Atlanta, Chicago, and Clippers and Dallas, but I see them the same as specifically the Hawks in Chicago, just that team that just is stuck in the play-in. You look at that 8 through 12, every year it feels like it's the same exact teams, and Memphis is a part of that. And Morant, it feels like his game is digressing really, really fast. And it's not a free agent market, so I don't think – they're in that no man's land, right, where they're not bad enough to get a good draft pick, but they're not good enough to make a run at it. So they're right there in D, similar to Atlanta.
Yep, completely agree with that. We've got an East playing flirter now to look at, Drew. The Miami Heat, who started the season on fire, have sort of flamed out a little bit in the past few weeks. Maybe not being quite sort of covered by that extra scoring boost that Norman Powell brought them at first. Again, just like this is a team that probably finished at the top of the play-in this season. They finished at the bottom of the play-in last season, but managed to sneak their way into the playoffs and get blown out in the first round. I could kind of see similar happening in terms of being in the play-in, getting into the first round and getting blown out by whoever's up the top there against someone like a New York Knicks, or maybe they give Detroit a slightly better series than they could give New York. But I think I'm probably low C with these guys, below the Pacers. How you
That's
feeling?
exactly where I see them. C, below the Pacers. They're consistently in that same spot as well, but they're a little bit better than Memphis and Atlanta. They'll find a sneaky way to squeeze themselves kind of somewhere there and make some noise for a little while and flame out, but they'll be there. And right now, they're 2 games above 500, and Bam isn't even playing well. So you got to expect that a move is coming, or he's going to start playing better. And just for that case alone, I see them kind of sneaking up a little bit.
Yep, that's absolutely fair enough. Milwaukee Bucks next. This is a team with some seriously bad vibes. That the whole Giannis doing a windmill dunk against the Bulls the other day, and then basically coming out saying it was like to G his teammates up. It's all just very strange to me.
Well, before you move on, now that we're on that topic, where are you with this? Let's talk about basketball etiquette, right? For our listeners, there's an unwritten rule that if the game is, out of reach and there's 35 seconds on the shot clock, the team will dribble the ball out, get a turnover, and then the other team should respond by also holding the ball. Where are you in this department?
I'm kind of generally anti-traditionalist. I just think if it's a rule that's like made between the players, then it's not up to any one guy to decide, like, on any given night, for whatever reason he does it for, either, by the way, to come out and be like, oh no, I'm just going to completely like ignore this rule that for years and years now the players have all kind of agreed upon as like a gentleman's handshake kind of thing. So the Giannis stuff just seems bad to me. Like it just doesn't seem like there is a trade for him. There's no trade that makes sense to my mind, really. I could see him being on the Milwaukee Bucks when the season finishes. I can see it finishing in really in a poor way because his roster is so poor. I don't think Milwaukee are committed enough to the future of Giannis, or feel like Giannis is committed enough to the future of them to make any big trade that helps him out. So this just feels like a sad team at the moment. And if Giannis is having to basically break decades of basketball etiquette just to try and inspire something in his team, then I think that's a bad look as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he's the only one. It happened to Derek Queen last week as well, that went on the other end and tried to score when time was out. But I heard Gilbert Arenas say this a couple of years ago, and I'm with him on this side. My thought process is that typically when the game is out of reach, that's when the teams empty their bench. If I haven't played all game, what's the purpose of me coming into the game to dribble the ball out? Like, I want to see what it feels like to get a shot off or to make a play in real time with referees on the court. So I think it's unfair to have this rule, if you want to abide by it, so what? But that doesn't mean that I have to, because, like, if I've been sitting on the bench all game, I want to shoot. I want to see what it feels like. I want to see if my work is paying off. So
it's more fair for a guy like Derek Queen than it is for Giannis.
I think Giannis' situation is isolated. That was I'm pissed. Our season isn't going well. I'm throwing my dummy out of the pram. But I'm with you with Giannis specifically. I think he gets traded, but I think he goes for very minimum. One first rounder. He's not going to get more than that, because no team is going to empty the pocketbooks on a superstar anymore, because we've learned that you need more than one guy to win now.
Yeah, and the trouble is with Giannis is that it could end up just being a rental, similar to Toronto getting Kawhi, for example. So I'm thinking D for these guys, Drew. Probably just above the Clippers. And the thing that is like rooting the Clippers down in the same way that Doncic trade is rooting the Mavericks down is like all this aspiration stuff and the Chris Paul stuff. I think it's probably why I just have Milwaukee ahead of them for now.
Why do you think Atlanta's in a better situation than Milwaukee?
They're not as bad at the moment. Is probably the one thing. Like this season is not going quite as badly for Atlanta as it is for Milwaukee, and some of that may just be based on expectations, and maybe some of that isn't fair. But I think this season is like so below expectations for Milwaukee. Listen, that roster is not constructed well at all. No one was looking at that roster going like, that's a championship roster, and I'm sure Giannis wasn't either, really. But it's like just how bad the vibes are, I think, is probably why I'm lower on them than I am on Atlanta.
Okay, I just wanted you to explain to the fans of why you have them so low, so they can be on your next, the Bucks fans.
Yeah, to be honest, you may have mentioned the name before that keeps them ahead of the Hawks. I could maybe have a bit more of a talk about Chicago, whether they go above Chicago, but Jalen Johnson is probably what actually keeps Atlanta ahead of them for me, because Giannis has not been a bright spark for Milwaukee this season. Obviously, he's been great in the way that Giannis is always great, but then take Giannis out of it in the same way that if you take Trae Young out for Atlanta, and the second in command in Atlanta is arguably better than Trae Young, whereas on the Milwaukee Bucks, like, who is your second in command? Is it Ryan Rollins?
Yeah, I think the argument here is if you take away the best player from these teams, how do these teams fare? And I think it's fair to say that Milwaukee, Atlanta, Chicago would fare much better than I think even more so. I think even the Bulls.
Right. Okay.
Without if Kobe White is out and Giannis is out, which team does better?
Yeah, I mean, the Bulls did at the start of the season, didn't they?
Yeah,
that sort of 5-6 game winning streak was without Kobe, so
yeah, okay,
like that. Minnesota then next. I was so funny when I was like doing the notes for this one, Drew, because like you start to realize how much symmetry there's been between like seedings last season and seedings this season. Minnesota Timberwolves is 6th seed again. They were 49-33 last season, lost in the conference finals to OKC pretty convincingly in the end, considering they'd had the sort of easier side of the bracket really in the playoffs. Where do I think for Minnesota? I'm probably B. I think I'm B. How about you?
I'm B behind Detroit and Celtics. They have the potential to be better than those teams, but I just think they're just so up and down, and I just think they are the same, whereas Boston has more potential because when Tatum comes back, in Detroit, they're young, but they are trajecting forward. So that's my argument for placing Detroit and Boston ahead of Minnesota, but I like them better than the Lakers. I mean, they beat the Lakers in 5 games last year, so there's no comparison there. So, and they made it to the last 2 Eastern Conference Finals. So for that case, they got to be in B, but they're behind Boston and Detroit for me.
Yep, New Orleans Pelicans next, I think, are just F, and I'm not sure there's even much need to talk about it really. Possibly even the lowest. This might be like, I don't know, one of the worst teams in the NBA in 2025. They were the lowest seed. I think the worst record were they as well last season. Just a bad team, and a bad team again this season, and a team who've got good players, but they're not part of the future necessarily because, like, I don't even know what Zion Williamson is at this stage now. So I think I'm tempted to go with them as the lowest. Though Indiana's got a worse record than them at the moment, but based on last season.
Last season they were 14th, so they were slightly 4 games above the Jazz. Right, yeah. But for me, I'm putting them at the very bottom because for me, Brooklyn, Charlotte has more talent, and that New Orleans roster, obviously they have Derek Queen, but there's moves to be made, and they're going to completely start over and build around the rookies. So
the gutting of that roster is coming, whereas I guess it's kind of already started in Brooklyn, maybe not so in Charlotte yet. But the New York Knicks, I think, again, A, Drew, and I'm not sure there's much need to talk about it too much. Lost in the conference finals to Indiana last season. They're the team I expect to come out of the East this season. Won the NBA Cup, whether people want to count that or not, I would definitely count that. So, I'm thinking probably just behind Denver in A for New York.
Exactly what I was thinking, between Denver and Houston, A, for sure.
Like it. OKC was the next team on the list, but we've got them rooted up in the top in S. Nobody is challenging them except for the San Antonio Spurs, who may well feature in my bold prediction, but you'll have to stay tuned next week for that, listeners. So we'll move on to the Orlando Magic. Again, another team that feels quite play-y generally. They've been better this season in terms of the idea that they're 5th seed, but I don't know. There's something about the lack of shooting on Orlando, Drew, that makes me think this is not a team that can go very far in the playoffs, as good as their defense is and as good as Paolo Banchero is. Yeah,
I see them as C, and my gut tells me they're between Golden State and Indiana. What were you thinking?
I'm probably the same. It's like, now that I look at, and I know this could just be the whole episode me just trying to move the Pacers higher up. I'd probably swap the Pacers and Golden State round and then put Orlando between that, so they're just ahead of Golden State but just behind Indiana. I'm not sure if I can tempt you on that yet. I just think Indiana's last season was so great, and I understand the luck argument and all those kind of things, but like, it's an 82-game season. The playoffs are long. I think Orlando had a worse year than Indiana, but a better year than Golden State.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we have to respect Indiana. You made it to last possible game of the season.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I agree with you. But, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's where Orlando fits in. They got two superstars. They're going to have to make a decision on one, but they do have a little promise. They have some great role players there. So, yeah, I like their situation better than Golden State's.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we've spoke about Golden State a little bit, but it just feels like another one of those aging rosters, and I'm not really sure what the next move is beyond that. Besides just to like try and keep extending that Steph timeline, but that window is ever closing. The Philadelphia 76ers.
Ooh, this is interesting.
Probably one of like they'd have been one of the lowest ranked teams in this if we'd have done this at the end of last season, based on like preseason expectations and all those things. I know we said that New Orleans are the ones who should be rooted to the bottom there, but like I expected way better from the 76ers than I did from New Orleans. They've been better this season, but again, like not necessarily helped on the whole by Paul George and Joel Embiid. I know Paul George has come back and been a little bit more effective in recent games, and there's moments of Joel Embiid looking at least, defensive-wise like the Joel Embiid of old, but I'm thinking maybe high D, low C I could be talked into for Philadelphia. I really like the thing that might prop them up more for me is their situation in terms of those young guys. I love Tyrese Maxey, love VJ Edgecombe. There's so much like the Q Grimes trade. When I was doing the research for this, like within that, I just think it's like a sneaky good trade. Quentin Grimes has made this team and that backcourt a lot better this season.
I can't put them in D.
I'm probably low C. Yeah.
Yeah, for the fact of obviously if we take last year, because we have to stay consistent with the argument, right? You've been trying to scoot up Indiana of what they did last year, and obviously you're looking at the injury to Halliburton of why you're keeping them there. I think it's the same thing for Philly. They had a ton of injuries last year, so they're not as bad as their record. You look at them this year, you could argue that they're underachieving, but still there's just so much inconsistency in who's available. But when they are all healthy, we can argue that. I don't see them as one of the B teams, but they're definitely a C team. I mean, I could see them beating any team in C, but then I could see them losing to every team in C. They're definitely ahead of the Magic for me. Where we put them next is what are you thinking? Well, if you're saying they're D, then you think they're behind Miami.
Yeah, I think they are behind Miami. I think Miami's good start to this season, and even getting to the playoffs last season from the play-in is what's keeping Miami ahead of me. I think it's always so hard because you're tempted to remember like the more recent times, like recency bias just is a big thing.
Yeah.
Last season was so bad. The Paul George acquisition in the end looked so bad, and I still think he'll be able to play good basketball for Philadelphia and be a good vet for these young guys, but I'd struggle to put them ahead of Miami. To be honest, it actually made me tempted to bump up Miami ahead of Golden State, and I know Golden State are just in free fall at this point if we do that. But yeah, I think I'm low C.
I think if we are putting weight on the last season, despite their injuries, and you look at I think if you look at the Paul George signing and you look at the Embiid extension, and then you look how he looks this year, you look at them and you're like, they're the both of the big. I mean, even though Paul George has been playing well, and you mentioned that a couple of episodes ago, right? But Embiid is the big elephant in the room, right? You're not getting off that money. They're clearly better without him, but when he's available, you have to play him, and they're just gonna be in no man's land this year. Yeah, C, definitely C, not D, but I could put them behind Miami.
Okay, I
can't go as far as D.
Yeah, we'll go with the lowest in C for now. Then the Phoenix Suns. Do you know what? Like I feel like we could say before every team when we go through this is a really interesting ranking. But like we've spoke about how you kind of quantify preseason expectations, and I just had this as like one of the worst teams in the league this season, and they've defied my preseason expectations. Dylan Brooks defies my expectations in terms of what I expected from him as a basketball player. I've loved watching Colin Gillespie whenever I've had this team on. It feels like they've moved away from that kind of like, I don't want to say toxic, because I don't think the personalities of like Kevin Durant or Bradley Beal are like toxic personalities, but I just think that big three-headed monster kind of era was toxic for so many teams, that I'm tempted to say it was for the Phoenix Suns as well. And Devin Booker looks like a weight is lifted off when he is no longer a part of that. I'm looking at like middle of C tier here. I'm probably above Indiana on the basis of how well they've done this season with the Phoenix Suns. What are you thinking, Drew?
Yeah, we can't move them ahead of Cleveland, and they don't have the star power as the Lakers. But when you look at Indiana, Orlando, Miami, do they have the best superstar out of all of those teams?
To be fair, maybe below Orlando is actually where I like them. I kind of ignored
Yeah,
Orlando a
yeah.
little bit
I think that's how you have to draw the line in
Yeah.
this tier is that with looking at their top guy, where he is, and for me, Devin Booker, we've seen Halliburton has the capability of taking you to the promised land. Orlando has two. Steph is Steph, but he's aging and he's small. But yeah, I have to put him behind Orlando.
Yeah, I think
But I will say that I want to give Phoenix some props because they officially have put an RRP sign on the Big Three.
yeah, absolutely, and
It's a done deal.
I think we all needed that, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's a chance that we're maybe not giving enough weight on how bad last season was for them, considering all the things that they did have. But to be honest, like I think that was kind of just what expectations were by the time you got to 2025. At least once that new year rolled around, we did not expect anything from this Phoenix Suns team. So kind of like where they're at for now. We'll move on to the Portland Trailblazers, Drew. I think these guys are low D, high F, and maybe don't need to talk all that much around them, to be honest.
Yeah, they're just a team of where do you place them? For me,
Yeah,
I'm almost thinking. I mean, they are 10 seed this year. For me, right now, just my gut tells me they're top of F
yeah.
because I can't put them in the same category as Dallas.
The vibes are good. Is the only thing I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
It was all a bit weird with Chauncey Billups stuff, and then Thiago Splitter came in and just kept those vibes going. There's so many good young guys there. I think you're probably right. I'm not sure I can put them in the same tier as Dallas based on the basketball, because the basketball has to matter. It can't just be a whole vibes league. But I think they are like, we should almost have another tier. There should be an E. There's not an E in this. There's just an F.
yeah.
There should be an E where Portland kind of ends up, because they're ahead of those other three teams below them there for me.
Yeah, I think F is fair, but we both are in agreement that 3 months from now that could change.
Yeah, absolutely. Sacramento Kings, to be honest, probably just go straight into just behind Portland in that. I mean,
F.
you could argue maybe even worse in F. Yeah, I could definitely put them lower down, but I'm trying to know because of Jordi Fernandez. I was gonna say I'm trying to work out if I'd maybe
I
swap
I
Nets and
I
Hornets,
cannot put
but
them ahead of Brooklyn just
no,
because
Jordi.
they're in disarray,
Yeah,
but they're not as bad as Charlotte's.
yeah, I like that. Yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah, that feels right to me.
yeah, I like that. San Antonio, I think
Ooh,
this again is where you can so easily forget last season, and it was clear they just wanted to tank last season. It was clear they shut down Wembanyama when he probably didn't need to be shut down, as all those pictures of him playing soccer when he was back home in France and stuff like that. I don't think he needed to be shut down. I think that was a tanking season, and that kind of matters to an extent. They draft Dylan Harper in the summer, who I think has just been an absolute revelation. I love watching Dylan Harper play basketball. Loved watching him play in OKC on Christmas Day again, and just seeing how for the third time in a row they were able to dismantle what OKC is throwing at them. Um, I don't think they can be A based on
it.
their finish last season, but I'd have them at the top of B.
You have them at the top of B.
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely B for me.
Yeah,
Taking last year into consideration. You also have to consider the improvements that they made.
yeah,
They've obviously got really lucky. And then, you can't ignore whatever your feelings are on the cup. You can't ignore that they made it to the finals there as well. In the toughest group. We have to remember they were in the group of death with Golden State, Houston, Portland, and Denver. And they beat Denver the last game to get in the playoffs. So B, but definitely above those three teams: Denver, Detroit, Boston, Minnesota.
Like it. Toronto, another really hard team to rank.
Yeah,
Much
I
better
don't
season
know what.
than last season. Um, some sneaky good off-season acquisitions in getting Mamu Kalashvili. Uh, where would I put
Well,
Toronto?
right now,
Maybe top of D, low C. They're fourth seed though. Maybe I'm
yeah, I
underestimating
was,
that.
but I was gonna say, like, right now, I'm looking at where these teams are placed, and right now they cannot be above Indiana
No,
because they weren't a great team last year. So you would have to argue somewhere, but they're better than these teams in D because when I look at the teams in D, they're just middle of the pack teams, right?
yeah,
Toronto has gone above that. They're not in that same sticky area as the teams in D. So, I put them in C
maybe
just
above
because they're
Phoenix.
fourth in the East.
Between Phoenix and Orlando, maybe is the kind of sweet spot.
Yeah, that feels fair. They just can't be above Indiana for me.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they can even be up above Orlando. I know they literally are in the standings right now, but based on Orlando's last season, I'm not sure we can do that to Orlando.
Yeah, definitely not.
Utah then I think are another F team. I'd probably again great coaching Will Hardy, similar to the Jordi Fernandez thing. It feels like that's another one where like they might have to fire that coach eventually because he makes this team so much better. Larry Markkinen, like the trade things around Larry Markkinen almost ebbed away now because Will Hardy and Larry Markkinen are just such a good fit together as coach and star player. Um, I'd be tempted to put them above Sacramento, and I could even maybe be talking to put them above Brooklyn. I'm just not sure. Put
They
them above
they
Portland.
for me, they're in a better situation than Sacramento and Brooklyn
Yeah,
because Brooklyn, they're not going to build around Michael Porter Jr., right? Whereas Utah, you look at Keontae George over the last 7 games, averaging 30 points. They have a lot more young pieces that they want to build around. Their situation seems a little bit more secure than Brooklyn, Sacramento, Charlotte, New Orleans, and they kind of are neck and neck with Portland. It's just who you decide who has the most promise out of those two teams, and I think Portland might have the better player right now. Yeah, that feels right. Top
I
of
like
F.
I like
Yeah,
that.
behind Portland. Yeah.
And then unfortunately we have to finish on the Washington Wizards, who I've already said. And when I came to this point as well, I was like, oh, I just like it always reminds me how I don't like this team. They do have some good young players. That's the one thing I probably ignored last time we spoke about the Washington Wizards. Really, we focused a little bit too much on the kind of disappointment that Alex Sarr has been, albeit he's taken a little bit of an efficiency leap really this season because he needed to from last season. That just as Drew referenced before with Reece Shea, looks like an all-time bad draft class, that one really. But I like Will Riley, who they managed to secure on draft night. So there are some players on this team who can build towards a good future. I'm kind of tempted to suggest that we swap Charlotte and Sacramento and then put the Wizards between Charlotte and Sacramento. So Charlotte, Washington, Sacramento as that three there. How are you feeling about that, Drew?
Oh, yeah, before you even mention that right away, I was thinking you placed them between Charlotte and New Orleans. They've won 4 out of their last 7. Again, a team that has a lot of young pieces that I feel like they can grow with. So that's why they're above New Orleans for me. I even feel like their record might be worse than Sacramento, but I feel like they're in a better situation than Sacramento moving forward. But Charlotte, they're behind Charlotte. So however we want to do that, because Charlotte has the better top tier talent. So I'm happy to place them right behind Charlotte, and you leave Sacramento and New Orleans. Those two teams are just, there's so many question marks about them, and they're bad. It makes sense that they are the 29th and 30th in the league.
Absolutely. Well, we'll round off then because our ranking is officially done. So we've got the OKC Thunder in their own league, in their own tier, up in the S tier of this. We've got A, Denver, New York, Houston. B, San Antonio, Detroit, Boston, and Minnesota. C is pretty stacked, but I think that's always the case, isn't it, when it's the middle tiers? They've got the Lakers, the Cavs, the Pacers, the Magic, the Raptors, the Suns, the Warriors, the Heat, and the 76ers. And then in D, we've got Memphis, Atlanta, Chicago, Milwaukee, the Clippers and the Mavericks. And then rounding out the F tier, we've got Portland, Utah, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Washington, Sacramento, and New Orleans. We feeling happy with that, Drew? As I look at that and when I talk through it, I feel like I've convinced myself on all those things now.
That feels really good to me. That looks fair. I think it even deserves a graphic. Yeah, it'll be interesting to come back to this in a couple of months. I think it'll be a little bit of shake and bake, but not much. I think once we end the season, I think we would have nailed most of these. But it looks good, feels good.
Love it. Well, that's going to be it for this week's episode then. So all that's left for me to say after me and Drew have put together our tier list here is to say, Drew, lead us out.
Yeah, happy new year to you all in 2026. We look forward to bringing you more content in the new year, bringing you a little guest on the podcast as well. But for those beginners, those that were with us to the Genesis, we appreciate you guys. We're going to get bigger, better, more consistent. So, stick with us. Appreciate you all. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.